Welcome to the Dentelligentsia Podcast. This is Nick Zagar. I'm here with Remy Isdaner, my partner, and our special guest today is Rob Montgomery of the Montgomery Law Firm, who is also a superstar podcaster. Welcome, Rob. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this is really cool. I mean, it's a really great opportunity to have you and kind of get into the weeds and hopefully uh, help kind of give our viewership some really good helpful insight that can kind of help them do their real estate transactions and manage their business at the highest level. So we're really excited to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your business and why you started focusing on dentists?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've had my firm for 28, and during that time, I've represented dentists, throughout that time. And really, in the last 15 or so years, it's become more or less the exclusive focus of our practice. We represent some veterinarians as well, but most of our clients, as of now, are dentists. And so we're helping folks who are transitioning in and out of practice ownership, either through an acquisition, startup with lease reviews and negotiations, purchases of real estate, buy-ins. We also help some people sell their practices as well. But partnership agreements, employment agreements, all the business, real estate, employment stuff that comes up in the course of dental practice ownership.
Super cool. This is, the most, there's so much information out there for, really people, I think, get into dentistry because they care about oral health and they want to serve their community. But there is so many layers. I mean, I am real estate in the real estate world, and I'm still learning every day. I've done probably over 1,000 commercial lease transactions and sale transactions, and still learning. And so, I'm really excited to pick your brain here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
excited to be here and talk to you.
I can't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't imagine you were in law school thinking to yourself that you were going to end up serving dentists and doctors. And so how I know we, depending on how much I want to talk to someone at any given time, when they ask what I do, I'll tell them either commercial real estate and leave it at that, or I'll do a deeper dive and the response is unanimously like, that's a laser focus. That's a really small niche, and inevitably I'm asked how I got into servicing the dental community. So I'll ask you, how did you get into servicing this community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And ironically, Remy, it kind of does go back to dental school for me. So I worked for a law firm while I was, I'm sorry, law school. I talk about law school sometimes and dental school interchangeably. It's like I talk to way more dentists than I talk to lawyers. When I was in law school, I worked for somebody who represented a large dental practice group. They had, I think, like 12 locations. And I did work on their matters. And then after I became a lawyer, I continued to do work for them. And then when I went off to my own, they became a client of mine. And there were people that left them, or groups that were related to them, or people that I met in the course of just doing business for that client that helped me branch out. And then next thing you know, you're meeting and working with dental specific realtors, CPAs, lenders, and you kind of get plugged into this network of people that are all serving this awesome industry. And next thing you've done hundreds and hundreds of these deals. And, while there is a legal aspect to what we do, obviously that's crucial, mission for us, having that familiarity with the dental business world and kind of what's normal and in a transaction or in a lease, the things that you see other people have made a mistake doing over the years. That's the knowledge and the expertise that you bring to your clients. So it wasn't always the exclusive focus of my practice, but like I said, probably over the last 10, 15 years, it really has become. And I love it. I enjoy working with dentists, and I really enjoy working with people in the industry and the collaborative spirit that we're all serving serving our dental clients.
Can you share a success story of when you really knocked it out of the park or really helped make a significant impact on a dentist's career through your legal guidance?
Yeah, I mean, there's no really one thing, I guess. It's just I think we do it on a daily basis. Where we're helping people get to the right place, work with the right people, and to avoid making mistakes. And that's the core mission. I mean, for us, I'm a lawyer that's been practicing for 30 years. I've got other lawyers on my team that have been practicing longer than me, and others that have been practicing for over 2 decades. So we're all highly experienced with the documents and the legal aspects, but it's really helping people just get to practice ownership in a way that they're going to be protected. Because, I mean, for most dentists, these are one transactions. You're going to do one startup. You're going to buy and do a lease for your startup once. You're going to buy real estate once. You're going to buy a practice once. Some people will do multiple practices, but most dentists don't. So, just getting each and every one of our clients into a good place where they're happy, that to me that's the success story that we do every day, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are too high, especially when you do it once, as you said, because there aren't any do-overs. Once you sign, it's it, man. You gotta deal with it. And so, I mean, from our perspective, an educated client is the best client because there are all those minefields and pitfalls that can happen, and if you don't have an experienced guide to kind of give you the data and give you the tools to make the best decision, you could really run into some problems. And so, yeah, I mean, it's we love our opportunity of working with them for the same reasons. It's really, we want to help them make the best decision, give them the tools to make the best decisions for their business.
Yeah, and it's frustrating for us too. Like occasionally people will come to us who haven't worked with us, who have done something and something's gone wrong, and they come to us and say, "Can you help us?" Like, I can't really now. There's almost nothing that couldn't have been prevented if it was done right the first time. It's like that old Fram oil filter commercial. You pay me now or pay me later. It's so easy to do it right if you're working with the right people and going through the right process. But like do it wrong, as you said, you can't undo these transactions. You can't give back a practice. You can't unsign a lease. You can't give back the real estate. And so the stakes are high.
At risk of modifying a classic, I would say pay me once now or twice later, right? In our cases, and so I want to ask you to share one of the best compliments or a compliment you've received from your work from a dentist. And I ask that also understanding that you're probably your role on our team is the unsung hero, because if you did your job correctly, then there are no consequences. That there are no issues. There's nothing to point back. But we talk to our clients all the time about the importance of spending, money appropriately on an attorney, and it's often where dentists want to save money because their projects are so expensive. But it really is the best money they can spend making sure that they're protected, because what you're doing is protecting them for the next 5, 10 or more years. And it can't be overstated. That said, if you could share a story or a compliment you received when it's been noticed, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, they're usually the same thing. When a client goes through a deal and says, "Thank you, I really you put my mind at ease. I feel comfortable that I was doing the right thing. I understood what I was doing, and that you made the process go smoothly." And they appreciate that they now are a practice owner. So that because a lot of, again, what we're doing is helping people. And for most of our clients are first-time legal consumers. They're people that are doing these transactions and first-time practice owners. So really giving them the peace of mind that what they are doing is right. And they don't know what to ask for, what not to ask for. I mean, you get an agreement, and there's a whole variety of things that you can, as a lawyer, attack. But for us, we're not going to go up and just rewrite the whole agreement just for the sake of rewriting the agreement. For every change that we make in a document, or for anything that we put in one of our documents, there's a reason it's there. And we pick and choose, especially with commercial leases. I always tell clients, commercial leases are very one-sided in favor of the landlord, period. That's just the way it is, and we can't change that, nor are we going to try. But it's really taking our experience as to what are the things that could possibly be problematic for you as a dental practice owner. So oftentimes people are borrowing close to $750,000 to do a startup in this space that they don't own. And that's okay. It's a great business model. You can get the financing, you can make money. It's an awesome opportunity to own your practice. But since you don't own this building, we have to treat that lease as that's how we protect that investment. Because if there's something in the lease that leads to a surprise, or you could accidentally default or breach the lease, you lose that space, you've lost that $750,000 investment in that space. So really, we're focused on the things that matter, the things that could practically come up and impact a dentist or prevent your patients from being able to access the space or the practice. So, things like relocation provisions, we don't want those. It's really important for us to have good assignment language in the lease. So for us, we do a lot of practice transitions too. The number one deal killer in a practice transition is an uncooperative landlord. So we want to take advantage of the fact that we're in at the ground floor and get good assignment language to limit or eliminate, ideally, the landlord's ability to have a seat at the table when somebody's going to sell their practice. Because again, that's how you monetize that asset, whether it's in the distant future when they're ready to retire, or if something happens where they become sick or disabled or have a change of life circumstance that need to sell sooner, their ability to recoup the full market value of that practice is going to depend on them being able to assign that lease. So that's the stuff we worry about. We don't worry about thises and that's, it's the things that really could impact their dental practice.
Well, what is talk to us more about the assignment language, because we see it all the time. A lot of times you will see a landlord who will, reasonably, I guess is the famous legal word, allow an assignment. If the assignee or the new entity is equal to or greater to the financials, as the existing tenant. And it's like a lot of times it's a brand new doctor, who's taking over that space. And so it's not even comparable. And so there's a lot of horse trading or arm wrestling that goes on inside that negotiation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't like language that says that the landlord will, be reasonable in deciding whether or not to approve that assignment. Because again, in the last 30 years, I could tell you lots of horror stories, but what Remy thinks is reasonable, what Rob thinks is reasonable, what Nick thinks is reasonable, what a judge thinks is reasonable, and what a landlord thinks is reasonable could be 5 different things. And so we don't want to sort of rely on that. And in a sense, that's sort of like punting in the legal world, that doesn't tell us anything. And, I've seen this play out. We had a doctor years ago who was disabled. She needed to sell her practice. It was a specialty practice. We found a buyer. She had a disability, the seller, our client, and everything came together. This dentist was going to buy the practice. She was going to be able to pay off her loan, assign the lease so that she wasn't going to be liable on that anymore. And the landlord, who was a notoriously unreasonable landlord, we'll use the reasonable word, said, we'll look at the financials. Okay, we get we have a dentist that's got $350,000 of student debt. She's got $100,000 of liquid assets. She's a negative $250,000 of net worth. Landlord says, you want us to approve an assignment to this dentist who has a negative $250,000 of net worth? Yeah, that's who buys dental practices. Overwhelmingly, the bank likes them. They don't have any problem with them. So why should you care, landlord? Somebody's willing to give them a loan for $800,000. The landlord says, okay, well, if they pay a 10-month security deposit, we'll allow you to assign that. Well, the rent was I forget, like $5,000 or $6,000 a month. So, $50,000 or $60,000, that's not in the deal. There's no financing for that. And who wants to give a landlord $60,000 to hold for the next 10, 15, 20 years? That deal died. The dentist defaulted on her loan, couldn't pay the rent, and it was a mess, and it was all because there was a unreasonable landlord who thought that they were being entirely reasonable. So for us, we want to see the ability to assign the lease to someone that purchases the practice, all or substantially all the assets of the practice. And then when that happens, the assignee, the practice owner, comes off from any liability, and their personal guarantee, which most of our clients have, that goes away too. That's what we want to get in pretty much every deal. And, are there variations of that we can still be comfortable with? Yes. But, a lot of it too. And, Nick and Remy, I mean, you guys probably appreciate this, but probably not as much as I do. This is where it comes down to working with a good realtor. I mean, you guys do a good job, right? There's a lot of people out there that aren't so good. And this is where working with a dental focused realtor really matters, because you need your realtor to sell to the landlord and to promote you as a tenant and you as a tenant as a dentist, how low of a risk you are from a default standpoint, how much of an evergreen tenant you are, that you're going to be in there for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and that you're going to sell the practice to somebody who's going to be in there for 10, 15, 20 years, that this space, if everything goes okay, and it should, if it goes the way it normally does, landlord is never going to be vacant for decades to come, and you're never going to have a problem with the rent. And if you don't like what we're asking for here, go lease the space to a restaurant, and good luck, but that's where working with somebody that understands the industry and can promote you as a tenant and you as a dentist tenant, that's just crucial, because that sets the tone, because all the stuff we're talking about, I mean, if the table's not set right, or if the landlord's not educated properly to understand why what we're asking for makes sense, it's a lot harder, and makes it much more difficult, if even impossible, for us to get.
We appreciate you saying that very much. We do include the assignment subletting language in our letters of intent, and it's an early topic that we hit on often with a landlord. And I think you made another great point with the education. There are unreasonable landlords, and you can't reason with an unreasonable person, but more often than not, they lack education. They don't understand the value of that tenant. And so we're educating them. We're having ongoing conversations, that ultimately lead to securing those terms that will protect our dentists long term. And so, we do that on the front end with deal terms, but then we really rely on you to make sure that that it's appropriately reflected in the contract itself, and and the legalese obviously is reasonable.
And that's a great point too, Remy. And this is also something that we feel strongly about. And I'm glad you said this. It's important to get this stuff in the letter of intent, in the LOI. And there are brokers out there that would prefer not to kind of have that friction during the LOI negotiation. But like if this makes it into the LOI in the manner that we want to see it, well, 19 out of 20 times it's going to make it into the lease like that, and it's going to be easier. If it's not in the LOI, or if the LOI says to be determined in the lease, we're lucky if we get that 1 time out of 5 in the way that we really want to see it. And the best time to negotiate this stuff is when you're dealing with the business people on the other side who want to cut a deal. And This is, you guys have that direct link. Once we get to the lease, we're dealing with a lawyer who's trying to protect their client, who's trying to be as conservative as possible. And then I start trying to sell them on this concept, and it's a lot harder, but the brokers that get in front of the difficult issues earlier on, you can make so much more hay with that and make the process a lot smoother. But there are realtors that would prefer not to get in the details. We'll just kind of leave that for later, and that makes our job a lot harder. Makes it that we have to spend a lot more time. Time is money, and unfortunately too, the outcome doesn't turn out as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a multitude of reasons why a broker may or may not, choose to get more detailed, and a lot of it is probably market driven, or somebody is really this is the spot they want, and they're willing to take some of those risks. But I was a landlord's agent for the majority of my career, and that's kind of how I ended up on this side of the fence. And we would see some of these 10, 11 page RFPs where they're basically trying to negotiate the lease at that LOI stage. And you know th- you know I wouldn't suggest with our clients that we get that we go overboard and are trying to negotiate lease clauses. But yeah, I mean, like this particular item is something that needs to be addressed on the front end 100%.
Yeah, yeah. It's not everything. No, by no means. But you know what, Nick? It's like the dental specific things like this that you get out in front of, because you can, like I said, you guys are going to have a much greater likelihood of success with this than with that issue at that time than I will when it comes to the lease.
Can we talk about, and I'm sure we could do a whole pod on employment agreements and non-competes, but if we could dive into that a bit, I'll lead in by saying that it's not uncommon for us to inherit an attorney on a project where it's your friend, your family member, your neighbor, right? We've all seen how bad an outcome that can be, especially with doctors and dentists, which is why it's so important to have somebody like you, Rob, on our team. But I think but there is an attorney, at least in those cases, where I often see employee agreements being presented to our clients, or which will include a non-compete, and those documents are often, they go unreviewed. They do not have an attorney look at those documents, and to me it's unthinkable, because the consequences are so great. And so talk to us a bit about what you're seeing in the market. Are you getting involved after the fact in some cases, and how are you able to help, if at all? What type of conversations are you having to get out in front of those problems, and be in a position to be able to review those documents? Talk to us a bit about employment agreements and non-competes.
Yeah, it's a great question. Very important topic. It does get overlooked a lot. We help young dentists review and revise their employment agreements. Same thing as our sort of mindset with leases. I mean, we're looking at the context of a young dentist that needs a job, and we're not going through that document trying to hack it to pieces and rewrite it. We're looking at the things that could present problems for them down the road, and specifically problems either getting paid or problems that would limit their options when it comes time for them to buy or start up. We see a lot of young dentists that do not have their agreements reviewed. I'm not so sure they even read their contracts. And when I'm speaking to groups of residents or dental students, I tell them, like, you have to flip the switch. You've made it to this stage of your life where you've signed apartment leases, you've signed a lease for your Subaru. These are contracts that have consumer protection laws baked into them. They're somewhat, not negotiable. And you could kind of get away with signing those without having them reviewed. However, these are grown-up contracts. Now, when you get an employment agreement from a national DSO, or even a single location owner doc, there's no telling what's going to be in there, and there's no protection in there for the employee. And there just about anything could be in there. And you can't assume that because your friend or classmate had something in their agreement that it's going to be in yours. There's no such thing as a standard agreement. So all these things are different, and they have to be reviewed. And not only is the language different, but what's important to the individual dentist is different. So if we've got a client who is taking a job in Austin for 2 years while their significant other or spouse is finishing their residency, and then they know they're going to move to Boston, well, then non-compete doesn't probably matter all that much. If we're talking to somebody who's got a non-compete and they are an orthodontist and they've got an uncle down the street who's a pedodontist, who's going to be able to refer them business after they do their startup. Well, then if they're going to work someplace in that neighborhood that's got a 10-mile non-compete, that's a problem for them, And so understanding what their goals are personally, and then being able to advise them as to what the ramifications are with these non-competes is huge. And a lot of times, we often hear, oh, should I worry about these things? They're not enforceable. I read it on a Facebook group, they're not enforceable, blog, or the attending told me not to worry about this. Like, nonsense. It doesn't matter whether or not they're enforceable. The only way you find out if one of these things is enforceable is if a judge decides whether or not it's enforceable.
That's right.
And for that to happen, there's been a lawsuit filed, a complaint, an answer filed, depositions, hearings, trial, all these things that could cost easily 6 figures to find out whether it's quote unquote enforceable. And most young dentists can't afford that. Not to mention, if you find a practice either to buy or you find a location that you like for your startup, then it's not like you tell the landlord, like, hey, I love this space, but I got a non-compete. I'll be back in a year after I finish litigating that. That's not a thing. Not to mention, even if you are someplace, let's say you're in suburban Detroit and somebody gives you a 50-mile non-compete. Everybody says, don't worry, that will never be enforceable. And they're probably right. However, you take that to the bank and the bank looks at this and says, we're not going to lend you $700,000 for your startup, even though this is a crazy non-compete, because they can't take the risk of you being shut down on opening day. So whether or not it's enforceable, it doesn't matter. You're stuck with it. And so anybody that's signing these contracts should approach them as though they are enforceable, because for all intents and purposes, from an economic reality standpoint and a business reality standpoint, they are.
I have a multi-part question that's kind of because there seems to also be that's on these same lines, but there seems to also be some misconceptions just about their employment agreement and when when they think the contract expires, or ends, which is what it is. But then the dates. Let's say there is a radius that they can't practice within, and then there's a time limit, and I want to get into the weeds and kind of really understand, because we see people and it'd be good to kind of get the information from you, what you think. But it's like, hey, if let's say they have 1 year or 2 years, and maybe take 6 months to kind of build out a space, but it's like, if they sign a lease, start doing work, but actually the practice doesn't start practicing until the termination of that term of the non-compete, is that kosher?
Usually that's okay, but I say usually because it depends on what the agreement says. There are some agreements that it's written in such a way that would be impermissible. So it's all what's in the document that controls that. It shouldn't be prohibited, and generally it wouldn't be, and we would say shouldn't, and generally, because it depends what the agreement says with all this stuff. And there's no sort of there's no one way to do this or write this. It's all depends on how those provisions are drafted in each particular agreement.
You want to talk to us about some legal pitfalls dentists face when they're buying a property?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to be careful about. Obviously, zoning, knowing that you've got the ability to build what you want to build there. If you're doing a ground up construction, which a much riskier process. But even if you're buying a property, making sure that dental is a permitted use, that's not always a given. Making sure that there is nothing about the zoning or anything about that particular building that is not compliant. And most of these things can be overcome, but you want to know about them, because that's going to inform the timing of what you're doing. You don't want to buy a building and just plan on operating the next day to find out that you're going to have to go through a several month zoning process or some sort of approval process, in which case, if you knew that before, you could have baked that into the deal and into the document so that, it wasn't a surprise after the fact. So I think that kind of stuff, zoning and use is really kind of one of the big things. Obviously, physical issues, making sure that the property's not defective and things like that. Occasionally we'll see some environmental issues, but I think more often than not, it's that zoning, the use, sometimes title issues, surveys, encroachments, understanding that, what you're buying, what you think you're buying is actually what you're buying. And that's where, getting a survey and doing a good title review kind of informs you in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, we a lot of times when or not a lot of times, but it's always scary when somebody hires somebody like you to inside of a purchase, to review the purchase agreement, and then after that they just, they think they're done, So
We won't do that. That's not representation. We generally will decline, and I think that's something that there's a misperception, I think, among first-time legal consumers that our job is just to do the agreements. It's like that's sort of like the commodity part of the project, whether it's a practice purchase or a real estate purchase. What's really important is everything that we're going to do to get you to closing and to make sure that all the conditions are satisfied and that there's nothing that's going to come up that's going to be a surprise after the fact. And most of that stuff has nothing to do with actually in the written agreement. The written agreement kind of gives us the platform to do all that stuff, but it's everything else that we do to get you to closing to make sure you're protected. That's what we do, and that's where the value is for a lawyer. And to be limited to just the document, I don't want just a document to go out the door and then for us not to have any control over something, because then if something goes wrong, even though we haven't been included, we're still like, we were on that ship that sunk, and I would rather not be in that position.
What are some of the key legal considerations dentists should address before launching a startup? I mean, we focus a lot on startups. I think we mentioned it's certainly our favorite type of project, given all of the hand-holding education involved. So talk to us about, what does that look like for you on the legal side?
Yeah, I mean, I think the legal side, obviously, if they're leasing the space, the lease is crucial. So understanding what's in that lease, making sure, like I said, there's nothing in there that's a surprise. But it also depends on, we have like a lot of different types of clients in the startup space. Like we have clients that are working with good consultants, some that are not working with consultants, some that are working with not so great consultants. Some have good realtors, some have not so great realtors. So really it's a case by case thing, kind of like what's the hand that we've been dealt. And we can manage all of those things. Just how involved do we need to get? Do we need to get involved in the LOI? Not if there's a good realtor involved and or a good consultant. But if there isn't, then we do need to get involved at the LOI stage to make sure that things are drafted properly. Frankly, and we're happy to do it. It's somewhat unnecessary, because if you're working with the right people, you don't need us to do that. But, for those people out there that make the mistake, and this is something we should talk about, do not call the name on the sign. Nick, who said he had a previous life as a landlord's rep, knows as a tenant, never, ever do that. It just totally ties your hands. It makes it almost impossible to get your own representation to help you. But in those deals, we have to be really involved in the LOI and do a lot more to help that dentist, because they're basically, I wouldn't say the landlord's the enemy, but they're not out to help them.
Well, there's a lot of information that they're not getting. That's for sure, because the landlord really holds all the cards in those negotiations, and they know the market, they know what spaces in the market they're competing against, and so they can really dictate the terms, and so that's why you really need an advocate in that situation to kind of filter out the noise and make that landlord kind of compete for your business. Because certainly, I mean, my hair started turning gray way too early, just because I was, I was very nice and very helpful, but I just couldn't sleep at night because, I wasn't helping the people that needed help in those situations. I was lining the landlord's pockets, which, I mean, a deal is a deal, I guess, to some extent, but, I still got to live with myself. So.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what people they think they're going to save money by doing that. And the reality is, there are two deals that the landlord's going to put out there. There's the deal to the represented party, and there's the deal to the unrepresented party. And the unrepresented deal is just not going to look the same. So Remy, it depends. Like that's what we're going to do is going to depend on kind of what the lay of the land looks like. We're going to assess who they're working with. Has the table been set right? Where do we need to get involved to try to influence as good of an outcome in as efficient way as possible? We also help clients with entity formations as a preliminary matter. So most of our clients are forming PLLCs. Sometimes we'll help with partnership agreements if there's a partnership startup, which I'm not usually a fan of. There's usually a consultation where it's like, hey, why are you partners in this startup? I think there are challenges to startup partnerships. So sometimes we'll get more involved in the operating agreement, which is really the partnership agreement. But, it's really with the lease for us is, like I said, making sure that those protections are in there to protect that investment and make sure that they have the ability to have some sort of liquidity in that investment in the future and that nothing could happen that could lead to a default. And for us, we'll get that initial draft lease that's prepared by the landlord. We're going to go through it, revise it, make suggestions, comments, and then find out kind of how that stuff is received. And we tell the clients that's where the rubber hits the road. Like you don't have to understand and be totally in the know of everything we're recommending on that first turn, because we're putting the stuff in there that needs to be there. What you have to worry about is turn number 2. What did they not agree to? What are the outstanding issues? And now we're going to educate you on what these things are, why they're important, and what some potential compromises are to get the deal done.
I'd like to go back because you mentioned the two deals, and we're not talking 5 or 10 or $1,000 of a difference. We're talking about hundreds and possibly multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in a difference because you're signing a lease, for maybe 7, maybe 10, maybe 12 years, and the value of that lease could be $1.8 million. And so if you 1.5 to 1.8 is a big difference. And so it's good to,
yeah, I mean, like in TI, especially, tenant improvement allowance, we've had clients that have come to us with unrepresented clients and have, given us LOIs or have talked to us about their deal. And like, well, and they're going into a shopping center. Like, how much tenant improvement allowance are you getting? What's that? Like, oh. And then, occasionally we're able to put the genie back in the bottle with that and get them something that is meaningful, but a lot of times it doesn't end well, and a lot of times it's like, look, you got to go get a realtor and a good realtor and find a space and get a good deal, and that's impactful. And we just can't say it enough. And it's like, it's tempting too. Here's a dentist. They're thinking about doing the startup. They're driving around their neighborhood or the town or where they want to be. It's a Friday afternoon. It's nice out. It's sunny. They're off. They drive by, they see this space for rent, call this number, like it's just like, you just can't do it.
Even when we
do not do it.
Even clients we've coached, we will still get calls saying, Remy, Nick,
yeah,
you're going to yell at me. And I know what's coming next. You're going to yell at me. My mom saw this place. She said I had to go take a look at it immediately. I did. I called. I called. I just had a few questions. So I saw it over the weekend, and I'm thinking, you knew better, and you still did. And that happens.
But that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is because as soon as they start asking you questions, a lot of your leverage just goes out the window because they know the right questions to ask. They're being nice, but it's really easy to be naive and kind of let the cat out of the bag.
And just to just finish up this topic though, so that people realize, this is the reason why this is bad is because the landlord is not going to want to have your tenant realtor involved in the deal because they're going to say our realtor is the one that did the whole thing. Therefore, we're not going to talk to your realtor. They're not going to split the commission. They're not involved. And so now the way the real estate business is set up, especially with the tenant representation side, is that, the landlord's going to pay the commission, and if you set this chain of events in motion that prevent your realtor from being able to be involved in that from an economic standpoint, you're on your own, and even if your realtor is going to try to help you as an accommodation, which is awesome. God bless them for doing it. I'm not so sure I would if I were in that situation, but you just so limit your ability to get that good advice and that advocacy that somebody's actually looking out for you and trying to negotiate that deal. Because even when clients come to me and they're like, well, I don't have a realtor and I don't know, I'm paying $30 a square foot. Is that good? Like, I don't know. I mean, I sure or not. I can't tell you what the market is. You've basically cut off your ability to have somebody who's going to advise you as to whether, what the market looks like and to help you negotiate the best possible lease. So it's like you're just totally shooting yourself in the foot with no upside. And a lot of times they'll just end, like I said, the deal will just die. And then they got to go talk to the right people, get the right realtor and find something that's appropriate because they've poisoned the well with by virtue of reaching out like that. It's just such a no-no. When I speak sometimes to groups of startups, I make everybody stand up in the room and look to the person to the left of them and look to the person to the right, put their hand up and say, I promise to not call the name on the sign. And then they sit down and I say, even though there are 20 of you in the room, there are 3 of you that will do this, and they all look around like, who's going to be, like, I know it because
Nick and I are going to start doing that.
We're speaking to the University of Michigan, shortly after this, and we'll have to try that one.
Make them pledge. Raise your right hand. I promise to not call the name on the sign.
Oh, look, working with an attorney like you who understands the unique needs, pitfalls, challenges of a dental project makes our lives and our jobs so much easier. And so, and in turn, a part of our job is to make sure that we make your job as easy as possible, bringing the same knowledge and understanding to the deal. So we make a good team. And, again, I can't overstate how important it is to have the appropriate representation and even better appropriate representation who, understands, how to speak dentistry.
Yeah. And then, Remy, yeah, that's a great point. You were asking what I like and how I got in this field. I think I love that collaborative spirit in the dental world. So when people are reaching out, starting these projects, that's why it's so important. Who is your realtor? Do you have a consultant? Who's the lender? Who are all these people that are going to help you, get to this place? And we want to surround ourselves with the best team, because if we have all these other people on the team that are good, then it's going to be a great outcome and it's going to make us all look good. And we're going to be able to do a bang up job for our client. And it really is a collaborative process with this stuff. We all have our roles, and working with experienced people alongside of you, the outcomes, it goes smoother and it turns out better. And that's great for everybody involved.
When we start working with a client, especially an earlier career dentist and who's thinking about a startup, I would say that the majority of them are interested in buying a building. Leasing kind of comes secondary. That being said, we do an incredible amount of research and due diligence just on the front end before we even start kind of showing them properties. But the point is that we want to uncover every stone and know exactly what's available, because ultimately, I think, regardless of which direction they go, because we're talking about, if you're transacting, it's what's the best deal for you at this time. Who really knows? We don't really know in your market where you want to be. And so it's really good to really gather that data so that they can really weigh it out with their CPA, with their financial advisor, all those things. So it's not, the team is actually pretty large, that they need, and they don't really, it's not just us, a real estate broker, commercial real estate attorney, architect, equipment supplier, and a contractor. I mean, the team really is pretty deep. So,
yeah, it can be. Yeah, and that's great. The more people, the more experts, the better they are. Just the better the outcome.
As we're transitioning to our last our kind of final series of questions, which are more on the personal side of things, I'll ask, what's the best piece of well, I guess this is still professional advice, but what's the best piece of legal advice that you would offer to an associate contemplating the leap to practice ownership and starting up?
Yeah, it's probably not even legal, Remy. It's really assemble your team. You're talking about a realtor, an attorney, CPA, perhaps a consultant, and find the people that you like the most or you're most comfortable with, that have the most expertise that can help support you. I think that it's important not to necessarily look for the cheapest. Sometimes that's okay. Rarely is it okay. When it comes to these other services, it's not like in dentistry, there's sort of like a minimum, requirement to deliver a certain quality of product of a crown. A crown is a crown. Now, some might be better, you might use a better lab, but like there's a tangible thing that you get. When you get into consulting, whether it's legal, practice consulting, financial consulting, accounting, all that stuff, and even real estate, there is no, sort of defined final product. You're buying time, oftentimes, certainly with the legal standpoint, and making sure that you're getting what you're paying for. And I think, if you kind of look for the cheapest, you're either getting something that's less experienced, or oftentimes in the legal world, just means that somebody's not going to spend as much time on your deal. And I think a lot of times people, especially first-time legal consumers, hear these horror stories like, well, how do I know? What if it's just going to be so expensive and they just overbill me? I think the mistake there, or what you need to do with that, is just do your due diligence and make sure that you're working with somebody that you can trust, who's going to do it and spend the time that needs to be spent. No more, no less. Not to just go out and try to find somebody that's the cheapest, because if your fear is that, hey, if they're just going to run the bill up on me, then that's a problem. Then you don't have a trusting relationship with this person. And whether that's your fault or theirs, that's probably somebody you shouldn't work with. But that shouldn't dissuade you from finding somebody that wants to do your project, is able to take it on, spend the amount of time that needs to be spent. You don't want rubber stampers. You want somebody that's going to get into the details. And frankly, some projects come together faster. They cost less because they didn't require as much time. That's awesome. That's what we like. It's just like everybody in this world. We like it when it goes smoothly and easily. When it costs less, great. We got plenty of other things to do. But if it takes more time, we're going to spend the time that it takes to get it done, and to get it done in the way that you're protected. And people that are quoting, low ball, flat fee numbers, I will tell you my experience, they're just not putting in the time to make sure it's done right. And they're the deals where problems come up after the fact. So
I love your response. And look, again, we can hammer this home 100 different ways, but it always concerns me when I hear that a family member or friend is going to do me a favor. They're going to do me a favor and they're going to do it for free. Like, don't walk, run. I promise. You don't want anyone to do you a favor.
Right. You
Yeah.
get what you pay for, Remy. Right.
So if you weren't practicing law, what career path or what else might you be doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are some days that I think about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I generally, I do like what I'm doing. I'm lucky. I like the people on my team, and I like I said, I like interacting and networking with other people in the dental world. I like to swim. I'm an open water swimmer. I do long marathon swims. I enjoy that. I've got a good open water swimming community. I like to ski. Occasionally, if I'm able to squeeze in golf. I used to golf more, but there's only so much time for everything else. So yeah, I like to travel too. But I honestly, I enjoy what I do, and knock on wood, I want to do it for as long as I possibly can in some capacity. I enjoy working with dentists, with these business transactions, and just helping guide them, and with these things are just so career defining. It's my podcasting partner Paul Goodman says, being involved with these startups or sales and acquisitions, like you're with this person at such an integral time of their lives. It's almost like you're there delivering the baby, when they're doing their startup, or buying a practice, or buying the real estate, or selling and retiring. And it's just it's fun, and to be able to impart that experience that we have and really help them do that in a way that puts them in the best possible position to succeed is just still excites me, and I don't see that changing anytime in the near future.
That's really cool. Have you ever gotten any advice any time in your life that stuck with you and really and really shaped you?
Yeah, I mean, at different times I have, and so much of it is context. I mean, I think recently, I heard a quote from, gosh, now I'm blanking on his name, uh, Brooks, it's Arthur Brooks. Are you doing something for your resume or for your eulogy? And, I'm at a point in time, 30 years into my career, I'm 50, almost 57 years old, that you start to think about what you're doing and what your contribution is to the people around you and the people that you serve. It's like, sometimes it's not about the resume and just doing certain things to say you've done it. It's, those bigger, higher level things that can be so impactful. So that's something I've kind of been kicking around recently.
If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of career advice or just advice, what would it be?
I think, really just pursue what you love and let the rest of it fall in place. That if you enjoy what you're doing, there's no sort of set way or set career path. I started off as a pre-med in college. I'm a lawyer now. It's sort of doing, I probably would have been better off starting on that track, but from where I am now. But, just doing things probably for the wrong reason instead of what I really love and what I'm good at. And that's what we all see, that if you follow your passion, generally speaking, if you work hard, things fall in line. And I think that goes for all of us, lawyers, dentists, realtors.
That's really cool. Do you have any questions for us as we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. This has been great. I mean, I love talking to people that are philosophically similar, who are providing good services and experience to their to the folks in the dental industry. So I've enjoyed chatting with you guys, and I'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you again.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It's really great to get to know you here, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rob.